We had almost like a beautiful life that I'd desired, right? Antonio was driving, we pulled out of our village. BMW came around the corner, wrong side of the road, and hit us head on. I'm so thankful that that happened to us, because in the time after that had happened, we decided to quit our jobs, sell our house, and move 4,000 miles around the world to where we are now, which is Dubai. We had no network, no money, and I very quickly realized no one cares. And so that trust thing for me became the number one factor. How can I get people to trust me so much that they come and spend money with us again and again and again? Getting people to buy your stuff is becoming so much harder because we don't trust. And so by building a personal brand, you make the trust stronger. You also make the time to acquire customers shorter.
What are some key principles around building trust?
So the first one,
why should business owners and people listening to this podcast care about using LinkedIn?
I think there's a few reasons why we should be looking at LinkedIn. So number one is that forever, this platform is 20 years old, and forever people have been looking at it as a way or a means to get a job. So it's been seen as a CV for a long time. It's actually got a lot of depth of interest and a lot of depth of the algorithm in there. There's so much information and data. I think it's the number one job board in the world. The amount of data you can get on jobs and businesses is massive. But the amount of people using it is incredibly low, relative, right? So you look at Instagram, Facebook, there's billions and billions of users. LinkedIn has only just got over the 1 billion mark. There was a 40% increase in usership last year. So that's an incredible, incredible gap. But the most important factor now is that we're in the golden age of building trust, and LinkedIn is massively underutilized. So 1% of that 1 billion post once per week, right? So that means that the opportunity is massive. So that's number one. No one's using it. Number two is, of that 1%, very, very few people, I would argue 1% of the 1% are using it properly, i.e. actually getting exposure. So that's the second thing. Exposure is actually really hard to get on there because people are there looking for a certain thing. You've got to warm up your audience to what you want to show them. And then the third thing is how you actually utilize it to get what you want. So we all know we can become influencers overnight if you want to. We could both walk over to the Burj Khalifa from here in 5 minutes and I could get 1 million views. You know exactly what you do and you would be able to get viewership. But on LinkedIn, the target is to build authority and build trust. Again, I keep coming back to that word trust. The trust deficiency in the world right now is massive. And so the opportunity on LinkedIn is huge. The way that we use it is build LinkedIn to then get you onto podcasts. Because actually, I think the future play, I'm looking 3 to 5 years in the future, is podcasting. Probably podcast guesting, because it's much more efficient than having your own podcast. But the only way to get onto big podcasts, I'm talking top 10% and above, is to have a solid foundation framework of ideas, a solid audience to resonate with your ideas and validate them, and then get onto the podcast and build your way up. And so that for me is why LinkedIn is the place to go.
I like what you said about the trust element, because I think we're in this weird, almost like risk economy, where it's like people have done and tried things in the past now and they've been burned. And it's like the barrier to entry is so low. Anyone with a phone can just like start a business and say, hey, by the way, I do this now. And you see their like bio change every 10 minutes. Like, first of all, they're doing this, then they're doing something different. And it's just like, how do I trust people? So what's the first, or what are some key principles maybe around building trust?
So the first one, which everyone overlooks, is confidence. So you can get to the factors later about why have you got value, where are your expertise, what stories have you got to tell, because that's resonating. You need to resonate with the person and then educate them. So you want to always inspire or educate ideally. But firstly, it's the confidence. Because so many people, and this touches on entrepreneurship in general, they think they can do something and they keep saying it and they keep talking about why they're good at something until they try. And they won't try because if there's no evidence to suggest that you can't do it, you feel confident and you keep moving forward. You know, we see so many people on LinkedIn, especially who are entrepreneurs. They talk about building businesses. They talk about entrepreneurship. They've never launched anything. They've never faced failure. And authenticity comes through as a way to grow on LinkedIn because everyone says it, no one means it. And so to build trust, you do that by getting the confidence first. Second to that is you look at your stories. Because what I really resonate with in our entire business is the positioning side of things. Most people, they have their stories and they get too close to the line of what you refer to as narcissism. They want to tell their cool stories about how they've done this and they've had an exciting life and look how many millions I've made, or look how I've just started a business and got investment. it's very easy. And we have joint friends who've got millions of followers and make very little money because they are known for the wrong thing. So the confidence to post is the first thing, and dropping that ego. The second thing is having that understanding of if you're 1 degree off, either way, on the way towards becoming an authority in your given niche, it's going to cost you money and it's going to cost you a lot of time. That's really, really important. And keeping on that trajectory, if you go off by 1% either way, it's fine, but you can get back to it. What you don't want to do is become known for something that you can't get back from. So you get 1 million followers, but you can't sell anything because they think you're known for fitness and you actually sell business, whatever it might be. If you talk about the same thing for long enough in different ways with different trends, you become an authority. If you just add loads and loads of different things around that, you become weak. And so anecdotally for our own podcast, one of the frameworks we have when we have guests on is, are they a specific solver for a specific use case? Because the worst guest you can have on is someone who is, has a lot of fame, maybe has a lot of money, and they can't speak about one thing in depth. And therefore it becomes really, really difficult to get any value out of them. So it's the same thing across LinkedIn. For me, it's the same thing in the whole value stack, from the bottom up. Like, does your origin story link to where your value is now in terms of your expertise? Does that link to what you're actually doing? Does that link to what you actually believe in? If yes, then you're going to find it very easy to build a personal brand, stay authentic, and resonate with a wider audience.
Let's just zoom out for a second, because I think we're in the world where it's quite obvious, like, that you need to build a personal brand, and we've kind of bought into, I guess, this idea of building an audience, posting content, creating content. But I remember when I hadn't bought into that, and I was kind of like, do I really need to do this to grow my agency? Like, I've been getting clients up until this point. Do I really need to be on social posting all this stuff? Is it really going to work? So you talked about why LinkedIn, which I think is a really valid point, because there's probably a time-limited opportunity there. It's like the early days of Instagram or early days of Facebook. So just by publishing consistently, you're already in the top 10%. And there's not many platforms, I don't think, where you can still say that's true. So I totally buy into LinkedIn. But if we just zoom out for a second and look at even just content creation, building a personal brand, building an audience, why is that important for me? If I'm, say, like a design studio or I'm an animation studio, why should I be thinking about building a personal brand, posting content, utilizing the platform in the way that you just described?
So let's leave trust aside for one second, because it's very easy for me just to say you'll build more trust and you'll increase LTV and reduce CAC. Fine. But actually, if you look at what's actually happening in terms of the economics of how you grow a business, so if you want loads of leads straight away, you would put paid traffic on. You'd use Meta, Google, whatever you want to do, whatever platform you can afford to get leads into your business. But we know that the cost to use ads or to acquire the customer using ads is getting more and more expensive. Second to that is that the competition is getting harder and harder to beat. And we're in the same economy that we touched on a second ago, which is the attention economy. So all of it really comes down to the strength of your creative. And so you're playing this very fickle game of, can I spend more to acquire a customer with a more attention-grabbing piece of content while spending as little as possible? But you're completely out of control. How can you control that? You're going to have to put out 100 pieces of creative a week. You have to test them. Doesn't make sense. And then what we refer to in our business as the check back happens. So the check back is when you look at a piece of content online through an ad, because I'm not against ads. Ads are really good. SEO is brilliant. All these ways of getting people on board is brilliant. Referrals, for example. But what you do, and what everyone does nowadays, is they look at an ad, or they find you somewhere, somehow. They will then go and check you somewhere. They will check your social media accounts. This happens everywhere. So you look even look at Virgin as a plane company. You'll still go and check the accounts of some of the people if you wanted to work there, or if you wanted to book a flight, you never heard of it before. If you're going to look at an SEO agency or a creative agency, design agency, whatever we're being specific about, you're probably going to look at the founder, because what you're looking to do is validate why they know anything. And so in the same way as when you look at building out any personal brand, you're looking to make sure that people actually trust and validate their ideas. It's the same in business. Getting people to buy your stuff is becoming so much harder because we don't trust. And so by building a personal brand, you make the trust stronger. You also make the time to acquire customers shorter. Because you think about all your personal branding. So there's one thing you can do, which is you can run ads. You can have SEO. Brilliant. You're going to get lots of people into your funnel. You can then direct them through your lead magnets or whatever towards your personal brand. They may have found you already on there because you may have already linked to it. That decreases the amount of time it will take to go from the start to the end of your onboarding by 70%. That's the stats we're looking at in a minute. 73% around there is the reduction in time.
When you say onboarding, do you mean them going from a potential client to becoming a client?
Yeah, time to acquire. Time to acquire a customer. And so for me, that's valuable because if you want to grow year on year, it's no good you putting out some money now in ads and then they come on board next January. If you're running a calendar year in your finances, you want them to come on board much quicker than that. You want it to become as predictable as possible. And so personal branding on its own is very powerful. But I think the real strength we have is that personal branding, and I keep linking that to podcasting as well, bolsters whatever other things you're doing. The second thing to really think about, and so a lot of our clients are benefiting from this in terms of cost, just as much as they're benefiting in terms of acquiring new leads, is finding and attracting top talent. So if you want to attract top talent in this economy, especially in Europe and the US, it is not good enough just to pay high salaries anymore. It is not good enough to have just a really good perks package. You know, the world is changing. We want more value. We want to be part of a mission. You know, one of our mentors, Dan Priestley, always talks about people want to look at joining a startup or joining a small business, learning about what's happening in there, and then starting their own business. But as a small startup or a business doing less than $2 million a year, how do you get people to join your mission? Because there's inherently more risk. And personal branding can help with that as well, because they can see people are buying into you. They can watch your momentum, which I think is really, really valuable. And one of the things that I think is really cool about personal branding is that you have the set of content pillars that everyone knows, right? So you're positioned as whatever you might be, a creative studio expert in short form video. Underneath that, you're going to speak about a certain number of things. You might speak about video editing. You might speak about creatives. You might also speak about leadership or startups. Because maybe you've done one before, maybe you've done investment before. What that does is give you a set of values and philosophies which hopefully link with your origin story, hopefully link with your mission and vision. And so if you've got all those together, everyone can see what's going on in the business. Everyone can trust you on different levels. Investors, employees who might want to work for you, clients who might want to work with you. So it becomes that sort of trifecta of power.
And what is a personal brand in your view?
Personal brand for me is a reputation that precedes you online. So when I first came to Dubai, I spent thousands of pounds going to networking events. I thought, I went to lots of free ones. I thought the quality was fairly low. Went to lots of paid ones. Quality's fine, but you walk in and you spend your entire time just introducing yourself. I do this, I do that. You're not going to build trust in that 5-10 minute interaction, or shorter if it's a speed one. And realistically, it's a brilliant way to build a network, but it's not going to create a predictable stream of revenue. And so I was like, what would happen if I had a personal brand that preceded me? And so I'd walk into a room and they'd be like, oh, I've seen you online, or I follow you, or someone told me about your stuff. So I started thinking that way. And then I was like, well, how can I accelerate this? Well, I'll start a podcast and try and speak to people who are just my level, and they'll come to me instead. And you put all these things together and you think that is now more efficient, and it's building me. Well, it's more efficient because it's allowing me to get ahead of myself, right? It's allowing my reputation to precede me. But it's also bringing business towards me, because I know that a personal brand will build me enough wealth on its own. But like I said, if you keep linking it to other things, like you go to a networking event, people already know you. You've already eradicated everyone that doesn't. You speak to the ones that do, and they're immediately bought in. I was saying to a guy yesterday we were doing some work with, usually on a sales call, people are already sold. So it makes selling very easy because they've already followed us for enough time. They've downloaded some things, they've watched some podcasts, they've seen us interacting with guests or whatever on our network. And it's really important here to reiterate, this is not a massive following that I've built or my partner's built. It's not massive followings. These are like 10 to 20,000 people following. You don't need a massive personal brand. It's really, really important to remember that. People think that they have to be celebrities, and they really, really don't. You want to be an authority in the very small niche that you're in. And so, for your audience looking at creative studios, creative businesses, I think it's really important for them to remember that, because you're looking into this hemisphere of everyone's so creative. Some people have nailed Instagram. Some people have nailed YouTube and LinkedIn. You don't need to. You need to be known for what you do authentically, and you need to add little bits here and there that maybe will come to you. And we've had this conversation before. You and I could build the exact same personal brand, but you will still attract people that want to work with you, and I will attract people that want to work with me, just because our personalities are slightly different. And that's another benefit of personal branding, because people understand who you are, and therefore they're like, I wouldn't want to work with him. I wouldn't want to work with her. Or maybe they're simply opposite. And so there's those levels of complexity which just need to be ironed out a little bit in the process.
So for people listening, for some context, we've been working with you and your business for the past like 3 months now, I think.
Correct, yeah.
So you've been helping us write some of our LinkedIn posts. You've been doing some stuff behind the scenes, and we have seen a big increase in engagement. And I do feel like people, the same kind of pool of people, are starting to know, like, and trust me, I guess.
Yeah.
One of the things that I enjoyed about that process was when we first started working together, you interviewed me basically for about 2 hours, and you asked me about my story, my experiences, why do people work with us, all of that kind of stuff. So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, I am bought into the idea of a personal brand and I agree with what Freddie's saying, but where do I start? Like, I'm a design studio and we've had a real variety of clients over the years. We've worked with like finance companies, we've worked with construction companies, we've worked with film studios, whatever. Like, it's really broad. Our services are, we design cool stuff for people, but I have really as the founder, I really don't have much of a personal brand. I've just got my own kind of personal network. Where do I start? Like, what's the easy sort of next step that I can start to build my personal brand and actually create digital assets online that do some of that heavy lifting for me?
So the way I would answer that is the same way that any entrepreneur that I aspire to be or watch or have analyzed does the same thing for every element of business. And that is reverse engineering from the goal.
Okay.
So if your goal is to build a personal brand, I would say immediately, what does that look like to you? Because personal brand, is that 1 million followers? Is that 10 million followers? Is that 1,000 followers?
Well, it looks like exactly what you just described, where I've got basically, when I jump on sales calls with people, they're already kind of pre-sold. Sure. And a lot of that selling has been done for me. That's the goal, I would say.
So I would reverse engineer that, and I would look at, okay, what is that person? Why do they trust me? Because if I could say, okay, they trust me because I've got 1 million testimonials. Fine. Well, maybe I haven't. So how do I reverse engineer the actual trust element? Well, it's probably, like I said, it's building out those content pillars. So I would sit down, and like we do in our positioning workshops, sit down. And the first question is, in your own words, speak about your business. And you can do this to yourself. You can do this to ChatGPT. Speak about your business. Just keep talking about it for 10 minutes, and maybe do it opposite someone. And so don't allow them to let you stop.
Yeah.
So when you go, this is what I do, they have to go, no, why? Or how? Yeah. How does that work? Pick the whole thing apart, record it.
Super valuable exercise, by the way.
Really, really cool.
Just even to do, Daniel Priestley's dad, when he was running the Startup Accelerator, he used to get us to do that. And he used to just say, just put your phone on record. Now, obviously, you've got ChatGPT, so it's amazing. And you can get that to give you feedback. But even just hitting record and going, right, I've got to speak for 10 minutes now about what I do, why I do it. And you just got to keep talking.
Exactly. Yeah. And then in the same way, when we work down, what you want to do is we want to pull people around. So it may feel sometimes like we're asking the same questions, but we'll be asking them in slightly different ways. And we're trying to pull people's minds apart so that anything that's in the middle falls out. So if they're not quite aligned with what they're trying to do, it becomes uncovered. So from there, we'll go, okay, second question, what's one word that resonates with you about what your business is trying to achieve? And sometimes it's just the founder. Sometimes they've got their whole marketing team or their PR team with them. And everyone's got different words. Someone might say, oh, we're happy, we're professional, we're reliable. Sometimes they might be like, we're do-gooders. There's so many different things you're actually working towards, and it's getting clarity on that one. So what's the value behind what we're trying to do? Effectively, it's origin, mission, value, right? But try and pull it around in different ways. So the answer to your question is spend an hour at least talking about your business. What does it do? Where does it go? And then think about yourself. Who are you? Where have you come from? Where do you want to go? Why? If money was not in the question, what does success look like to you? I think that's one of the best questions, because imagine if there was no money in the world. What does success look like to you? We'd probably be doing a very different thing, because once you've got that, you can then start to go, okay, let's rebuild it up again then. So if we're going to talk about your stories, let's go back as far as we can and put the origin story to good work. And by that, I mean, what is the most important thing that's happened to you in the past that resonates with where you're going? And so some people, they really struggle with that because they haven't got an interesting origin story, and that's absolutely fine. But there's probably something in your past that is why you do what you do today.
Yeah.
And like I said, most entrepreneurs are running from pain. There's normally some sort of pain in their past that is why they do what they do today. I'm sure, not all of the listeners are going to be entrepreneurs perhaps. So if you're not an entrepreneur or you don't have that pain, just think about, okay, so if you do design right now, well, how did you get into design? as I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have just picked it on your schooling list and gone, I'm just going to do design. You'd have probably been doing art when you were 5 or sold a painting when you were 9. I would build a big picture up as stage 2 of why. Why is it really interesting to me? And then the sort of tertiary elements of that would be what makes you different. And so obviously the story makes you different. Your approach, your method's definitely going to make you different. Your current views, if that's part of your current story, that's going to make you different because your approach is probably going to, vary from someone else, or you may have worked with some amazing clients. You may have worked with very small, tiny clients. Maybe you only work with people under $100,000 a year. Build a massive picture of that up. So that's your information bank. The way we would then do it is give you a positioning proposal. So we'd go, there's all your information. We've analyzed it against the market. This is where we think you can go. I would do it yourself. Look at everyone on LinkedIn. Look at everyone in that search bar at the top that does SEO if you're an SEO company. Look at everyone and look at their banners. Look at anything they're doing to make them stand out. It's a bit like funnel hacking, right? Like from Russ Brunson. What is someone doing to get people to come towards you on their personal brand? But look at the funnel that's included, because a funnel should be integrated in the personal brand. Maybe not to get direct leads. People are very unlikely to book a call direct from LinkedIn these days because it's become spammy. But if you're able to build trust through your thought leadership or content and your authority, they will do something. They'll come close enough to you to brush past and give you a little bit of information, whether it's a DM or an email address or a phone number, for you to then nurture and use your personal brand in other ways to bring them closer. So that's what I do. And then sort of the last part is just start. Like, I know that's going to sound so corny and I hate that I've said that, but if you start now, literally no one cares. Like I said, there's a billion people on there. In your circle, you might see no one posting on LinkedIn. That's because you're not in the right circle. Like when I started on LinkedIn, it was just me posting effectively to my old friends and my old colleagues. And you get messages being like, "You all right, mate? What's good? Are you okay? Everything fine?" And over time, people start to add you and you add them and you build this network and this web starts to explode. And then now when I open my LinkedIn, it's the most creative platform I go on. There's no one trying to steal my dopamine. There's people just trying to give value constantly. And you can weed out the ones that haven't actually got any value. They're just writing in a cool way. But actually, I love writing. I've always loved writing. So I'll read that and go, how cool is this? Again, going back to Hormozy, he says whenever he scrolls on social media, which I have to assume is very, very inoften, but he will stop at every ad and every bit of content because he's looking at, every single thing is interesting. So I'll do the same on LinkedIn. I'll look at people that are in my niche, people that are not in my niche, every LinkedIn ad, every video that's going up, see what people are doing. And so just start and then iterate, which is the same as literally everything. There's nothing different here. This is not a special platform. You're just early to the game, so it feels odd.
Yeah, and I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I tried, I put this out and there was no response. And
Good.
So that's it." And I'm like, okay, try something else.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's really important to fail. I'm new to the entrepreneurship game. No one in my family's ever been an entrepreneur ever. And so we've been doing it for about 2.5 years and I have failed so many times at so many things. Good. I'm so glad that I have, because then you know where you're going. And so imagine if a post went out. In fact, I had on Wednesday on my podcast, I had the lady called Lara Costa. She's the #1 female creator in the world on LinkedIn. Her first post on LinkedIn went viral and she had 60,000 followers. Her first post about 3 years ago. So now she's massive. But if that happened to you and you're listening to this, you wouldn't accelerate as hard as you think you would, because you get those followers, but they have got no idea who you are, because that was luck. Well, clearly that was luck. You've hit an algorithm somehow. If you fail and no one listens to you for 3 months, you are going to hone your messaging and your positioning so well that people will buy from you. If you went viral tomorrow and you posted for 3 or 4 months first and everything's set up, your SEO is lovely, your page is brilliant, you've got a lovely funnel that's worked a little bit but not really, you go viral, you'll make money. Do you want followers or money? That's the thing. And that's where authority does balance out. Because obviously you have lots of followers, you get high authority as long as it's directionally correct. Lower followers, perhaps you won't get as much authority, but you can convert them because you're still a thought leader if you've done it correctly.
Okay.
Which you will.
Yeah, which you will.
Yeah.
What do we need to understand about your story to understand why you're so passionate about this and why you do what you do today?
I grew up in a household in the southwest of England, just outside Bath. Both of my parents were in the police. In the UK, it's called a constable, so it's like the lowest level. They're in the police for 30 years. Normal childhood. There's some struggles when we were young, but nothing that is worth talking about in at this time. I just had no idea what I was doing. I literally just went to school, normal school, didn't really study that hard, just did a bit of sports. And I was being forced towards university. No one had ever been to university in my family. I took a year out after sixth form, so I think I'm 18. and just worked in a job. And I was lucky enough to have met my girlfriend, who is now my fiance at the time. And I'd been part of her family for a year or two. And that was the first time that I experienced entrepreneurship. So I'd go home from our free periods at school and they would all be at home. And my family were never at home between 8 and 6. Why would you be at home? Her brother was at home. Her dad was in the army at the time, but he would have other jobs. He'd be doing, he'd be at home, or the mum had her own studio and she'd be at home. Sister would be at home. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. What's going on? That was my first foray into like, oh, okay, this is odd. I remember telling my parents, you haven't got to join the police, because I thought I was just going to join the police.
Yeah.
That was my thing. Anyway, I wasn't brave enough or intelligent enough to go, I'm going to try that. I had a year off. I did a lot of exploring. So I did a lot of traveling. I did things like I tried to do my skydive license, motorbike license, anything I could to just become more valuable in the world. Ended up going to uni because I just knew I couldn't do that. I couldn't do a 9 to 5 at a low level with low qualifications. But I didn't know what to do. So mum and dad were like, you're going to be the first person to go to uni. This is amazing. I was like, okay, fine. I'll go to uni. I'll do business because I read some business books or whatever. So I went to uni and spent all of my time whilst at uni working to then afford to travel. So I'd go to uni, travel over the summer, travel over Easter, travel at Christmas. In my second year, I went to do an exchange program in France because I wanted to do anything to make myself look different. So I went there for 6 months and tried to learn French and went on their master's program and learned anything. Again, always traveling whenever I could. Finished uni and I was like, well, that was 3 years and now everyone in the world has got a degree. It just feels like you're amongst people and now everyone's got a degree. So I was persuaded by the university to do a master's degree. So I did a bachelor's degree in business management and a master's degree in economics. Again, I actually did my full-time master's alongside my full-time job. So I got into a job as a performance analyst for a pub company in the UK. So it's got 200 pubs, 200 million pound businesses though. That's the way you looked at it, and you analyze their performance and you report back each week to directors and go, we should do this, we should do that. So you'd look at like, should we implement Tesla solar panels? Should we buy our energy from there? Should we change our glassware? Whatever it was to make it more and more powerful. But everything was so regimented. So the youngest person there was probably 50 and I was 21. And so I was wearing like old men's suits. Like I was wearing my dad's old stuff. And I just thought this was the way forward. Bought a house at 22, saving up, because I thought, oh, getting the property ladder at 22. Imagine how boring that is. It was a really rundown house. So I was just renovating it by weekends and after work. The most boring thing you could do between the ages of like 18 and 22 is try and be an adult. And that's exactly what I did. And so then I was like, right, okay, I need to change jobs. This is actually just before COVID. And so I applied for a job at the world's largest digital publisher, which luckily enough is based in Bath, although they do a lot of work we had offices in New York and everywhere around the world, 5,000 staff, and they do like 4 billion a year. It's a massive company. And I didn't think I was qualified enough because again, I'm in that mindset of the only way I can make money is by doing something like direct exchange. That's how I'd grown up. And so you had to write a cover letter explaining why this was your dream job. And I loved writing. I'd always written. And I was like, this is not going to work. Like I've got a couple of degrees, but so is everyone. I've got a bit of experience, but so is everyone. And so I wrote a letter explaining why I wanted to be an astronaut. And that's my dream job. And I explained that, no one wants to work as this job. Everyone wants to be an astronaut and the skills transfer. This is how I think they transfer. And the cool thing about this company was that there was 8 on the board, publicly listed company, 8 on the board, 3, so the CEO, CTO, and the chief product officer, or chief revenue officer, were allowed to hire someone to shadow them, a young person. And so the CRO liked my cover letter, and I went in, had like 4 or 5 interviews, passed all their cognitive tests, and got the job. And so I started on the first day of lockdown from home.
Wow.
And this company, there's 5,000 people, 60 people in my department. I was responsible for about 20 of them. At 24, we're doing 300 grand a day profit in my team. That's how intense this is. As a company, we're doing 500 million monthly views on website pages. So no ads, no video. This is just their sessions. So someone clicks on a website and they read it, and we'd make money through affiliate marketing. So we'd persuade you to buy a Dyson Hoover. We'd show you the different prices, which our tech could bring. And then we'd sell you it and we'd get commission. That's how we did it. And so I was there, and that's really the start of my story, because that's where I learned everything. The oldest person around me was 30. I was 24, 25. Why am I being given a team of that at that age of people that are older than me? They just shoved me in at this high level to go to see what you can do. Can we raise you up, right? And so during those few years, we bought companies. They're on a massive acquisition plan. So in the UK, we bought the UK's biggest price comparison platform for insurance. And we bought Australian companies. We bought Marie Claire in New York. And so we'd go in and go, okay, we're buying this company. They'd be like, Freddie, do you think we need all these team members, or should we make these ones redundant when they come across? I'm like 25 at this time. So the pressure was unbelievable. And at the same time, in my private life, we sold the first house for a profit, bought the second one, and we were renovating that one. Because I was like, I need to just work as hard as possible because life is mental. Life is really hard, all going really well. And in 2022, I'd just been headhunted with my boss to go and work at a much bigger company, like a 200 billion pound company. But in 2022, our life sort of changed. When I say I mean mine and my fiance's life, because I was in our house just outside Bath again. We renovated it. It was perfect. Almost like a beautiful life that I'd desired, right? I worked up and my parents were like, you've got the lovely house and lovely life now, you're safe. But I was 27, actually 26. And so therefore, I'm still looking for more. That was always in my mind. So I'm reading books, reading Dan Priestley's books, whatever I could. And Tony was driving me and her to her dad's house where I was going to sign to become a trustee of the Bates Foundation, which you're a patron of. And on the way, about 5 minutes from our house, we pulled out of our village and we're on a 60-mile-an-hour road, like a small road in the UK, and a BMW came around the corner, wrong side of the road, and hit us head on. And so we were flipped upside down, stuck in a ditch. So in the UK, you have like the V-side ditches. So we're completely dark. There was smoke and blood and screaming, and it was absolutely horrible. But I managed to drag her out, and we got out. There was a doctor who was behind the car that hit us, and we were fine. We had a couple of broken ribs and nothing life-changing, nothing worth moaning about, because I'm so thankful that happened to us. Because in the time after that had happened, we had 2 weeks off work where we had x-rays and physio, whatever. We decided to quit our jobs, sell our house, and move 4,000 miles around the world to where we are now, which is Dubai. Because we knew there was more than what we are currently doing. I'd been funneled, especially me, but also Antonia, towards just be safe, do the safe option. But we knew that there was more. And we knew that we could do it. It was just going to take a bit of capital and a bit of hard work, And so we landed in Dubai with no money, really, because we hadn't sold the house yet. We couldn't get the house sold in that short amount of time. We had no network. We had her brother, but he didn't really know him and keep himself to himself. So we just cracked on. So that's why I went to these networking events and just joined whatever I could. And I very quickly realized, as I sort of alluded to at the start, that no one cares. Like no one cares about you, especially when you start a business. I thought it'd be just like my life had always been, like do A to get B, start a business. But it was so hard. Also moving to the Middle East, so 4,000 miles from home, it is so different here to do business than it was in the UK. Even though I had very limited experience, I only had corporate experience, I roughly knew what I was going to do. But here it didn't work for a long time. And so that trust thing for me became the number one factor. How can I get people to trust me so much that they come and spend money with us again and again and again? And so realistically, we grew our business through LinkedIn, through the podcasting, and then through referrals, which for me is the art of trust, because it means you've got a good product, but it means working with you is good. And that for me became like the business in the first year. Can we get people to trust us enough? Can we show them how we've done this? And can we leverage what is going on in the world in terms of that trust deficiency that I alluded to? That was a long-winded story, sorry.
You saw that working and then you were like, I want to help other people to be able to do
People
this.
asked us.
Right, people asked you.
Exactly. So people were asking us, can you help do that for us? We were just talking about it, really. We were sort of like, this is what our business is going to be, a sort of full service marketing. I knew I loved writing. So I was like copywriting for internal comms, whatever it might be. We had a few consulting clients where we were like, I've just come from a massive business. So I was like, I can teach you all of this if you want to do affiliates or whatever. But they were like, okay, but you're getting all your leads from LinkedIn. And I just started the podcast and I had some cool guests on to start with, even though I started it with like $10. And so you could just see that sort of whirlwind starting where they're asking. And I think as soon as someone starts to ask, as long as you're careful, you can utilize it to grow. As long as it's not a niche or a trend. Sorry, not a niche. It's not a trend or a fad. And so then I was like, okay, I'm going to commit myself to taking everything that I've learned in the corporates and put it into the platforms now that I believe in, which is, like I said, LinkedIn and podcasting and everything that goes around personal branding in a business context. So not an influencer, an authority, a trusted authority in whatever industry you're in.
I just want to go back to that moment where you decided to quit your jobs and move 3,000 miles around the world to somewhere where you didn't really know anyone. Because to anyone listening, that seems like a very big risk. I'm always fascinated by these events that happen in our lives that shift our perspective enough to give us the courage to try something new. What was it that you learned, or what was the mindset shift that you had when you were in that accident?
So after that accident, we went back to our house because you have red whiplash, but you also have, I didn't know anything about this, but you go into a state of shock. So you think you're fine, but your heart rate's at 140.
Right.
You know, you're in the ambulance and they're like, you need to be looked after tonight. Just, you know, both of you can't go home. And my father-in-law turned up because we were going to see him, and I rang him. I also rang my boss as soon as the car had crashed, saying, I'm going to be late back from lunch, sorry. I rang my father-in-law and said, we've had a crash, can you come help us? And so we went back to the house. Antonia's dad took us back to the house, and our 1-year-old Labrador was there, who we were going to bring with us. Our laptops were open, and bearing in mind, this was going to take us 20 minutes maximum in our lunch hour. I'd just come off a call with my boss, so I told him, I'll be back in 25 minutes, we'll have a chat, we'll continue the call. We'd made teas on the side, which was still steaming. The doors, we lived in a village, it was very safe in the UK, probably not now. All the doors were open, the windows were open. So you walked back into that house as if nothing had happened. But we should have died in that crash. Everyone who was there, the detectives, the fire, they'd launched the air ambulance. Everyone was like, how on earth have you got out of that alive? I'll show you pictures after, you may have seen. It was just one of those crashes that you shouldn't walk away from. We changed our car about a month before, which I think we could put a lot down to. So imagine walking back into your house that you've just left, and it's perfect. In my eyes, it was perfect. It's relative. There is a shift in your mind that happens there where you go, if I had died, everything here would be exactly the same. Or imagine even worse, in my eyes, imagine if Antonia had died. She was driving. Imagine if I'd walked back to the house and been like, how do I continue my life now? Because 10 minutes ago, this was exactly the same. And so for us, there's a lot of, I'm a very reflective person. I'm not a quick learner. Like if you teach me stuff now, I will ring you tomorrow and go, I get it now. I'll think about it so much. And you imagine having 2 weeks off work, we were getting sent, for some reason, brownies. Everyone sent us brownies and flowers, and people were trying to come and look after us and stuff. There's so much that goes on that you just go, life is not very long, you know? And I think there's a massive stat that a lot of people between the age of 32 and 27 feel like they haven't achieved enough. And so I feel like I'd been lucky. Because like I said, I wasn't the smartest guy. I wasn't the hardest working, but I managed to put myself in uncomfortable situations to achieve enough by the age of 25, 26. But that becomes very subjective when you're shown something that could take everything away. And so there's a lot of stuff in my childhood that happened that came back up again. I was very ill as a 4 or 5 year old. And so I'd almost parked that because I didn't want to be known as the person that was ill and has now got better. I want to be the guy that's fine and he's smashing it. But when someone shows you again a flash of death, you can't forget the stuff that's happened to you. And so I was like, that is changing. We're doing something and we're both smart enough. We can do this. There's a bit of naivety in there, I will admit. There is naivety in how easy growing a business is or moving abroad is. And so I'm lucky I've got a brother and I've got 3 brothers-in-law. One is in the army in the UK. One is in business in Dubai and one is in business in Copenhagen. So for us, it was a choice of, we're going to move abroad because I knew that if I was going to start a business, I want to do it in the most practical place to grow a business in the world. So a frontier city. So in my eyes, I was looking at Dubai, Singapore, a couple of other places, but they were high on the list. The best places to start a business. Not practically, but in terms of the economics of it. And so we looked at Copenhagen, we looked at Dubai. One was darker and more tax, one was lighter and less tax. Different challenges, different opportunities. And so we had to take the risk. There's no way I could have stayed in that job. And so I remember ringing my boss and saying, I'm going to leave. And he was like, okay, leave to the new company that we're been headhunted for. I was like, no, I'm going, I'm done. And they couldn't believe it because it's an odd thing for a young person to do when you're on a trajectory that's just going to be quite cool. But he was 10 years older than me. And he was like, yeah, but in 10 years, you could be on like 150 grand. And I was like, but what is the point? Like, if you've got a business that's scalable, you can do that in a month. Not everyone, but some people can. And so I think a lot of it was the coiled spring that I had inside me to be like, you've actually not stretched your legs yet. You've not taken enough risks. And I think a lot of entrepreneurship is taking risks.
Would you say this is a fair comment that you would erred on the side of security up until that point, and maybe you felt like there were risks you hadn't taken?
100%. So all the way through school, I think there's not many risks. Like you play rugby and whatever. In my gap year, which I literally just worked at a till at a garden centre and at the weekend skydived. Like never done a joint skydive. I learnt it on my own, jumped out on my own, pulled the parachute, did 8 of them, did my motorbike license, travelled, alone. That it was a risky year. There's a lot of things that could have gone wrong, but it was brilliant. And then I went back to university because no one showed me, no one shone a light on the opportunities I could have had. No one ever said, you could do this. I saw, like I said, some of my family and law doing different stuff, but it's not their job to go, well, if you do this, then this, then this, you can get to here. And I didn't know that was going to happen. I thought, I have to be careful. And my mum and dad were like, uni's the best way to go. And they didn't know any different. They just wanted to be proud of their son. And so you then go from the university environment, working really hard, to the first job where you're around 50-year-olds. And they're all, I celebrated 4 40-year anniversaries in my 2 years there. 40 years at the same company. And I think I realized like, this is pretty bad. And then I just neglected that when I went to the second company because it was more exciting. And you think, oh, this is going to be brilliant. And then that sort of thing happens and you get a reset and go, okay, there's probably more. I've got a long time ahead of me to live. And it made me just go, I'd rather move away, start a business and fail and come back to a good job than never having done it. I don't want to have regrets, And even now, when I get to a point where I'm like, we're stable again, the business is growing really, really nicely. I'm going to get to here by the end of the year. I go, that's a risk. There needs to be something just to make you slightly uncomfortable, whether it's, reaching out and meeting, going on bigger trips or meeting new people on the podcast or anything around you that makes you uncomfortable, I think is really important. That doesn't mean the business is going to suffer. Like the obvious thing to say is add a new product. I don't agree with that, but getting yourself into uncomfortable situations, I think is now something that I readily do. And we talk about it a lot where like I will get up early in the morning. I don't want to. I'll just get up early, make myself uncomfortable, do all the hard stuff because then it makes my afternoons easier. And like that kind of stuff now, I'd rather put myself in uncomfortable situations because I've now seen the growth that it can give us.
There must have been a thought or a seed somewhere in your mind that you wanted to start a business or you wanted to live abroad, because it's a strange thing to like have that experience then just go, right, I'm moving to another country and I'm starting a business. So was that something that was in the back of your mind but you just felt, well, why would I take that risk because my life is so good and so secure? Or
yeah, I'd started a couple of businesses when I was in my teenage years. Like I think we probably all did. Like I had one called Great Gardens where I'd mow your garden for £2 or wash your car. Or I had a t-shirt business in my gap year where I just bought some t-shirts. My brother was going to be an architect, so he's good with the drawing, did a few designs, had them made up, sold them at a rugby festival. There was little things, and I love the idea of commerce. I don't really know why. I used to watch like The Dragon's Den or Shark Tank in the US or The Apprentice. I love the idea that you could create something and sell it, but I could never get it to go anywhere. Like I could make a couple £100 and that was like, oh, there we go. That was my summer done. And I like to read the books. Like I'm not very good at reading, like storybooks, that kind of thing. I'm way better at just reading the things where someone goes, this is what I've done, this is how you get there. And so the book I alluded to earlier was The Nomad Capitalist, which I can't remember who it's by, but he spoke about why on earth do we stay in the same town and use the same banks and the same shops? And my parents, both from my town, and they haven't left my town. They actually have now, they've retired to the coast, but they'd stayed there their entire lives. And so we were able to go on holiday and stuff now and again, but it was very much that was the center of the world. And, Bath, which is a city of 100,000 people, was a big city to me until I was about 20. And so there was a number of things that book resonated with me. And I went to New York in 2019 or something, and my bank card that I'd used, because my parents told me to use when I was 15, wouldn't work in America. And I rang them and I said, this is a massive bank in the UK that you'll know. Why does my card not work in America? And they're like, our cards don't really work abroad. And I was reading that book at the time and I was like, this is crazy. So I, that day, got rid of that bank account, got a global bank account, and did a number of things like that because we've done lots of traveling. So I knew there was better places. And you've traveled way more than I have, but we're touching on, I think, 45 countries or something. And there's so many valuable areas you can go to. And so the business side really came from just, I knew there was something. I know you can make something work. And then the corporate side is also, that was very innovative. Like we would just come up with new product ideas, get the dev team to fix it, and then try and put something live. It was very innovative. Every week there was meetings. How did that go? Try this, stop that. I love that stuff. And then the living abroad side, like we'd done a lot of traveling. in 2021, we'd come to Dubai to visit my brother-in-law, and I was so against it. I didn't want to go, to the point where Antonia was going to go with her mum. And then I was like, well, hang on, I'll go. But I really wasn't up for it because I wanted to go to Sri Lanka or, the places that are a bit more back in time. I think it's brilliant. The culture there, the character's fantastic. And so we came here, and within 3 or 4 days, I got it. I was like, okay, living abroad's cool actually, because I love the idea of being around different cultures, different opportunities. You see things in different ways. It's a melting pot. All big cities are melting pots of cultures. And then you add onto that what you have in places like Dubai, where you've got the convenience. But the convenience for me is not to make you lazier, it's to make building a business more efficient. And so now I look at Europe and I'm like, I would love to live in Europe, somewhere in Italy, maybe the UK again, somewhere around France, Denmark. But right now, this is the place for me to have high growth. The US may come into it. I was listening to a podcast on the way here talking about how the US is actually going to have a resurgence for entrepreneurship. Like they're doing really well, and maybe Trump will help it. But living abroad was always a dream. And I'm the classic person where I'll go on a holiday and go, I could live here. I could definitely live here. And then people around me started to travel and started to move abroad. And I was like, I want to have a business. I don't want to have a predictable life. And I want to experience more than I'm currently experiencing. And it felt like a risk that we should take.
And if we just bring this like full circle to personal branding and LinkedIn, how does that story you just told me play into what you do online now and the kind of people you attract and the kind of people you work with?
Because we don't want to work with people that haven't got a story. I want to work with people who, number one, are fantastic at what they do. We've had clients in the past where they want us to build a personal brand and they're not good at what they do. And that isn't, we can't do that, because that's becomes lying. That's inauthentic. But for me, imagine if I believe I'm building a cool story for my family. We're doing some cool things. We're around incredible people in an incredible place. That attracts people that want to do a very similar thing. And I don't overtly say what we're doing in terms of like where I want to go and what I want to achieve. But I hope that the energy brings people in that want to do a similar thing. And we're part of several different groups where you go in the room and the energy is high. There's high vibration people in there. And I like that. I like to be the most unsuccessful person in a room, or at least let them think that I am. Because I learn so much more. I will be a lifelong learner. I will never position myself as an expert. I hate the word expert because you can't achieve it. Like, you can't get a qualification that says expert. And so therefore I want to be the person that learns forever. And to answer your question, like if I'm having fun, people we work with are having fun, and we're also achieving something together, and we're on a similar mission, we'll get better results. And opportunities come faster and faster when you've got that kind of mentality, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's about attracting similar people that share the same values as you, that resonate on the same frequency as you, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the winner effect, right? You haven't got to be a winner financially. If you're a winner in your mind and you're not over-egging what you can achieve, I think there's a lot of power in that.
And it's interesting you say you don't want to be the expert, because I think a lot of people don't put themselves out there online more because they believe they have to be portrayed as the expert, and they feel a little bit like imposter syndrome and like, what do I say without sounding desperate or all of that stuff. So
exactly. And so, like I say, you don't want to be an expert, because once you get to an expert level, you're going to spend most of your time defending what you say,
right?
Which is not a good place to be. You want to be an authority. So if someone challenges something that I say, I'm like, perfect, let's learn. Like, have you got the data? I'll show you my data. Let's have a chat. That's the idea of being an authority. If you're a high enough authority that someone listens to you, but you can also allow them to challenge you and you argue back, argue is a terrible word, debate back, what happens is that you become even more of an authority. The worst thing that can happen is you position yourself as an expert, someone challenges you, you then can't defend yourself because you for some reason have over-egged how good you are, you then lose authority. So if you just position yourself as a lifelong learner, we talked about authenticity at the beginning, and everyone online is saying authenticity. But they're saying things like, this week, guys, I lost a 6-figure client. But it's okay, I won a 7-figure one. That's not authentic. Tell me about how you lost that client, why you lost them, what you're going to do differently. That's what I want to hear. That's authentic. We don't want to hear wins. And if you haven't got any wins to share yet, don't worry. Just talk about your expertise. Talk about what's going on in your life. Like I said, the origin story, we've all got one. Your current story is literally what's happening now. What are your opinions on the world relative to your industry? And your offer story. What clients have you got? Who are you working with? How are you making your product better? That's what we want to hear. And we want to see the wins. We want to see the failures. And ultimately want to come along with you on your journey.
Love it. I mean, your story's incredibly fascinating. So thank you for sharing that. You've been an awesome guest. Where can people find out more about you?
So you can find us on the website, so healthyentrepreneur.club.com, or Freddie Pullen on LinkedIn, or Healthy Entrepreneur Podcast, which you are coming on very soon. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks for being a guest.
Thank you for having me.